I've always been into cars, especially racing. It started when I was a kid watching my dad tinker with engines in our garage. By the time I was 16, I had my first project car, a beat-up Honda Civic that I slowly transformed into a beast. Now at 32, I've got a small collection of modified cars that I race for fun on weekends. This past Sunday, my wife and I decided to hit up a local drag strip for a no-prep event. If you're not familiar, no-prep racing is when they don't treat the track surface, making it more challenging and unpredictable. We loaded up our trucks with three cars: my Honda Civic, my Nissan Laurel, a Japanese import, and my buddy's Mitsubishi Eclipse. The day was going great. We were making runs, tweaking our setups, and even winning some friendly wagers. By 8 p.m., we were up about 20 grand and feeling pretty good about ourselves. That's when this guy showed up. Picture the douchiest Chad you can imagine. All swagger and no substance. He starts running his mouth about how slow our cars are and how amazing his ride is. I tried to ignore him, but then he crossed the line. He made a sexist comment to my wife suggesting she didn't belong at the track and should go powder her nose instead. My wife, bless her, just rolled her eyes. But I'd had enough. I challenged Chad to race my wife in the Laurel, since he seemed to think women didn't belong on the track. Chad eagerly accepted, thinking it would be easy money. When I suggested racing for pink slips instead of cash, Chad confidently agreed, boasting that he'd take our car. We shook on it and got an official to hold the paperwork. As they lined up at the start, I could see Chad grinning like an idiot. The lights dropped and they were off. Chad got the jump, pulling ahead at first, but my wife knows that car like the back of her hand. Halfway down the track, she caught up and then left him in the dust. It wasn't even close. When we went to collect Chad's car, things got ugly. He refused to hand over his car, claiming my wife got lucky and demanding a best-of-3 race. His friends were laughing at him, making those dumb "you got beat by a girl" jokes. I spotted the keys still in the ignition and grabbed them. That's when Chad sucker punched me. I defended myself, but I didn't want to start a brawl. The track owner eventually came over and kicked Chad out, banning him for the rest of the year. But no, this morning I got served with a $100,000 lawsuit. Turns out Chad had taken out a massive loan to build his race car. A 1969 Pontiac GTO was about $80,000 worth of upgrades, and now he was trying to sue me for theft. I hired a lawyer who got the suit thrown out in less than a week. But we didn't stop there. We filed for restraining orders against Chad and hit him with an $18,000 defamation suit. When we showed up to court for the restraining order hearing, Chad looked ready to explode. He tried to spin some story about how we'd threatened him into the bet, but I had an ace up my sleeve. I asked the judge if I could present some evidence. I played the footage from my car's Black View system, which records audio and video inside and outside the car. It showed the whole interaction, completely contradicting Chad's lies. The judge wasn't amused, and he granted 3-year restraining orders for both my wife and me. He also ordered Chad to pay a $5,000 settlement and found him in contempt of court for perjury. The judge sentenced Chad to 7 days in county jail and a $3,000 fine. Chad's face went from red to ghost white in seconds. Sometimes karma needs a helping hand. So now we've got a sweet GTO in our garage, Chad's spending a week in jail, and maybe he'll think twice before underestimating a woman at the track again. I was always a decent student in school. Not the top of the class, but I did alright. Mostly B's and C's, with an A here and there if I really put my mind to it. I never skipped class or tried to get out of lessons by faking illness or anything like that. I just showed up, did my work, and tried to stay out of trouble. But there was this one teacher, my French teacher, who made life miserable for a bunch of us. I'll call her the witch, because that's what she was. She had her favorites, the kids she'd dote on and praise constantly. The rest of us might as well have been invisible. I wasn't one of her golden children, so I got used to being ignored or talked down to in her class. It was frustrating, but I figured I just had to get through it. That is, until one Friday afternoon that I'll never forget. It was the last lesson of the day, and I wasn't feeling great. My stomach was queasy, and I felt a bit off, but I didn't think much of it. I'd had a big lunch, so I figured it was just that. About halfway through the class, things took a turn for the worse. The room started spinning a bit, and I felt hot all over. My friend sitting next to me leaned over, looking concerned. She asked if I was okay, pointing out that I looked really pale. I told her I wasn't feeling good and thought I needed to go to the medical room. I raised my hand, hoping the witch would let me leave. No such luck. When she acknowledged me, I asked if I could please go to the medical room because I wasn't feeling well. The witch brushed off my request, reminding me about the importance of staying in class and telling me to pay attention to the lesson. I tried to focus, but after a few more minutes, I knew I was in trouble. I raised my hand again. This time, I pleaded with her, saying I really needed to go to the medical room because I thought I was going to be sick. The witch refused again, telling me to stop disrupting the class. My friend, bless her, tried to help. She spoke up, telling the teacher that I really didn't look good and suggesting that maybe I should see the nurse. The witch's face turned stormy. She pointed at me and ordered me to come up to her desk. I stumbled to the front of the room, my legs shaky. The witch leaned in close, her face inches from mine. She threatened me with after-school detention if she heard one more peep out of me. When I tried to protest, she cut me off and told me not to say another word, ordering me to sit down immediately. I trudged back to my seat, fighting the urge to throw up with every step. The next few minutes were torture. I could feel it coming, but I was too scared to say anything. Finally, with about 10 minutes left in class, I couldn't hold it back anymore. It happened so fast. 1 second I was sitting there, miserable, and the next I was throwing up all over my desk and the floor. The sound of retching filled the silent classroom. When I looked up, the witch's face was a picture. Her mouth hung open, eyes wide with shock and disgust. For a moment no one moved. Then the witch sputtered, telling me to clean up the mess immediately. I weakly replied that I didn't think I could because I still felt really sick. The witch looked around frantically, but there was no one else to pawn the job off on. With a look of pure loathing, she grabbed some paper towels and started cleaning up the mess herself. My friend spoke up again, asking if she should take me to the nurse now. The witch, clearly overwhelmed, agreed and told her to get me out of there. As my friend helped me up, I caught sight of the witch's face again. She was green, clearly fighting not to be sick herself, as she cleaned. My friend walked me to the nurse's office, where I spent the rest of the afternoon recovering. Word spread quickly about what had happened, and by Monday, everyone was talking about how the witch had to clean up student vomit. She never accused anyone of faking illness again. Whenever a student said they felt sick, she practically shoved them out the door to the nurse's office. I guess she learned her lesson the hard way. It wasn't funny at the time. Being sick in front of your whole class is pretty mortifying. But seeing that horrible woman get her comeuppance, that almost made it worth it. Almost. I live in a small town in the UK where we only have one gas station with 2 pumps. Usually it's not a big deal, but on this particular day, it became the center of a ridiculous situation. I had just passed my driving test a couple of weeks ago. In the UK, you get a temporary paper license when you pass, which doesn't have a photo on it. It's just a piece of paper with your name and address until the real one arrives in the mail. So, there I was, a newly minted driver, broke as any student could be, heading to school on a Wednesday morning. My car was running on fumes, so I stopped at our town's only gas station to put in my usual £5 worth of gas. That's all I could afford at the time, so I was a regular there. As luck would have it, one of the 2 pumps was out of order that day. I pulled up to the working pump, put in my measly amount of gas, and went inside to pay. That's when things started to go sideways. There was a new guy behind the counter and he gave me a weird look as I approached. The attendant asked to see my ID, which caught me off guard. I explained that I didn't have any photo ID with me. He then informed me that he couldn't sell gas to someone who might be under 16. Baffled, I pointed out that I had driven a car into the station, and the legal driving age is 17, but he remained unmoved. I offered to get my paper license from the car, but the attendant insisted it needed to be photo ID to prove it was really me. Growing frustrated, I suggested I could go home and bring back my passport in a few minutes. The attendant agreed but said I'd have to leave my car there because he couldn't let me drive off without paying. I was completely stunned. My house was only a few minutes' drive, but it would take me at least 20 minutes to walk there and another 20 to walk back. All this for $5 worth of gas. In a last-ditch effort, I tried to reason with him, pointing out how long it would take me to get ID and asking if he really couldn't sell me this small amount of gas. But he said it wasn't up to him. At this point, I was too stunned to argue anymore. I reluctantly agreed to leave my car there and come back with ID in 40 minutes. Then I walked out to the station, leaving my car exactly where the attendant told me to leave it, right in front of the only working pump in town. I started my trek home feeling frustrated and a bit thirsty. I always left early for school to get some work done before classes, so I still had about an hour before I really needed to leave. When I got home, I decided to make myself a cup of tea and have a second breakfast. Why not? I was already going to be late anyway. After about 15 minutes of enjoying my unexpected break, I grabbed my passport and headed back to the gas station. When I arrived, nearly an hour after I'd left, there was a queue of 10-15 cars, and the attendant looked like he was about to have a meltdown. He was trying to explain to a horde of angry customers why they'd had to wait for almost an hour to fill up their cars before work. Just as I got there, the manager showed up. I calmly explained to him the situation, how I had to leave my car there because without ID I wasn't allowed to pay for the gas, and without paying for the gas, I wasn't allowed to drive the car anywhere. The manager looked like he was about to explode. He turned to the attendant, who was now pale as a ghost, and started yelling at him. I almost felt bad for the guy. Almost. In the end, the manager had to issue over £200 in free gas to the waiting customers to make up for the inconvenience. I finally got to pay for my $5 worth of gas and drive off to school. Needless to say, I was never asked for ID at that gas station again. In fact, the new attendant couldn't even look me in the eye the next time I came in. I guess sometimes following the rules too strictly can backfire. Spectacularly. I've been working at this fast food joint, let's call it Wendy's, for about 3 years now. Started as a regular crew member, but I worked my butt off and eventually got promoted to manager. I've been bouncing between two locations, my home store and another one on Riddle Road, for the past 6 months. Now, Riddle Road is notorious for being a nightmare to work at. Entitled customers, staff that never show up, you name it. But I've always been the type to rise to a challenge, so I kept at it, splitting my time between the two stores. Last night was supposed to be my final shift at Riddle Road, before permanently moving to my home store. I was looking forward to a quiet night, maybe even an early close. Boy, was I in for a surprise. I show up at 5 p.m. ready to start my shift. The place is empty, and I don't mean just customers. Not a single employee had bothered to come in. I call up the general manager, explain the situation, and he gives me the green light to close up shop. So there I am, cleaning everything for the umpteenth time when I hear that dreaded beep from the drive-thru. I put on my headset, thinking maybe it's just some confused customer I can politely turn away. I politely informed the customer that we were closed, and they'd have to come back tomorrow. But the woman in the car wasn't having it. She demanded to speak to a manager, claiming we had messed up her order and she wanted a replacement. I tried to explain again that we were closed and I was the only one there, but she cut me off, threatening to keep ordering multiple times if I didn't comply. I take off my headset, ignoring her ranting. I've dealt with her type before, and I know engaging will only make things worse. I continue mopping the floors, thinking she'll eventually give up and leave. About 10 minutes later, the store phone rings. I pick it up, wondering if it's my GM checking in. It was the Phoenix Police Department. They told me they'd received a report about an issue at our store. Now, I could have just explained it was a misunderstanding. But you know what? I'd had enough of entitled people making our lives miserable. So I decided to let the police handle it. I explained to the officer that I was the only employee there, we were closed for the night, but there was an angry customer who had been sitting in our drive-thru for the past 15 minutes, refusing to leave and making threats. The officer asked if we needed them to come down, and I confirmed that I would appreciate their help. The officer asked for a few more details, which I happily provided. Then I hung up and went back to cleaning, occasionally looking out the window at the irate woman in her car. About 5 minutes later, I see 3 patrol cars pull into the parking lot, lights flashing. I watch as they approach the woman's car. There's a lot of arm waving and yelling from her end, but the officers remain calm. Next thing I know, they're pulling her out of the car and slapping cuffs on her. Her friend in the passenger seat looks absolutely mortified. One of the officers comes to the door to get a statement from me, which I provide gladly. As they're leading her away, I overhear her yelling threats about suing the restaurant, the police department, and probably me personally. I just shake my head and finish up my closing duties. Once everything's done, I grab my stuff and head out. As I'm walking to my car, I see the officers still dealing with the angry woman and her friend. One of them gives me a nod, which I return with a wave. It wasn't the quiet last night I'd hoped for, but watching karma unfold in real time, that was pretty sweet. 3 years in fast food had thrown a lot at me, but this takes the cake.